Hey guys, good morning. Welcome back to my garden. If you're new here, my name is Kira. Feel free to call me Q. And today is all about harvesting. So I have a ton of containers here just to go around the garden and get everything. So we have not attempted to harvest everything that's ready in the garden in a couple months here now. And so my goal today, we'll see if I can get to all of it, but my goal today is to go through every single section of the garden and harvest all the food that's ready. We'll see how far I get. Right now I have about 30 minutes for this first kind of wave of it. And yeah, just come along with me as I see how much food we can grab out of this garden. So it is mid-September right now. So our garden is definitely in transition between summer and fall. We've done a lot of taking things out, a lot of cleanup, but we do have things that are going strong still. So all of our peppers are still in here and really starting to get going now. Our weather is starting to cool down a little bit, so we're getting in the like low and mid 80s, which is really nice. It's probably about like 60 something out here right now. I'm hoping that with cooler weather as we go into fall, our last kind of stretch of our summer garden will do really well, and whatever is flowering right now will continue to fruit and go until our first frost date, which is usually between Thanksgiving and the first week of December. So we have a really long growing season here in California in zone 9B. So anyway, let's get to it. Let's see how much we can get in half an hour.
Harvesting in the garden is just one of my favorite things to do. I mean, it's great because it's the time when you get to kind of get the reward from all of your hard work. But I really just love the process of it. I find it very therapeutic and meditative. To the point where on this day, I had about 30 minutes because there was something else I was going to do after this. So I came out here just to do a quick video and a quick harvest. But while I was doing it, I felt such peace and happiness that I just decided, you know what, I would rather spend my time doing this thing than the other thing that I had planned. And so I stayed out here and just kind of kept harvesting things. And it was such a great use of my time for my mental health. It's one of the main reasons why I continue to garden, was because the first time I tried to grow anything and tried to have a garden in 2020, I got so much more out of it than just produce. The calm and peace that I felt was instantaneous every time I went out into the garden, and the more time I spent out there, the better I felt day to day, especially in such a scary time with so many different things happening and so many unknowns. So I ended up actually out in the garden on this day for about 2 hours, just going around harvesting everything. And it was definitely time well spent. One of the things I really enjoyed picking recently is these pole beans. This is a variety called Blue Lake pole beans, and I just love like I said, the repetitive process that you have of just like pulling them off one by one. There's always more that you don't see, and I love just how prolific these have been. And this is the first year where we really got a good amount of string beans at all. So I have so many different plants in the garden right now of these pole beans, just because we've never had great success with these in the past. And in fact, the ones that I'm pulling off of right now, these weren't even doing very well at the beginning of the season. And so I planted another section, and then I planted another section even on the shady part of our garden. And it's nice to know that, sometimes it just takes a little bit more time and they will grow. More than anything, now I know that I really want to grow these in the shadier part of our garden next year, because that's where they came up the fastest and were the healthiest and really took off. So as far as variety, these were pretty good, but they are stringy once they mature. And so we will be looking for a variety that doesn't have the strings, just because it's hard for us to get to them when they're really young. We just couldn't pick them all fast enough. We didn't even see them all. Even if we were coming out here every single day, I think we still would have missed some and they would have been stringy. And so we probably do want some that are just going to be a little less work, because we don't like the stringy texture once we're actually eating something. It's actually not pleasant at all to find that, you missed a few strings, which is what we've been having. But these have really good flavor. I ended up getting just a huge amount off of this one section. This isn't even the biggest section that we have. And then I turned right behind me, and there was another smaller section. It was about half of the one that I just pulled. So I got a few more off of here. But we got multiple meals worth from just, a half a cattle panel of pole beans. So the fact that we have the equivalent of kind of like 3 cattle panels full of these things. And so now I know I can use some of our cattle panel arches to grow other things that, are kind of tall varieties of things, different melons and squashes and things like that. And so I'm really excited about what that means for future gardens.
Okay, that was a lot. This huge bowl came off of one cattle panel of Blue Lake pole beans. This is way more than I thought were on here. Oh, I'm seeing some I missed. And this isn't even our biggest section of Blue Lake pole beans. This is just one. There's another smaller section behind me, and then we have our gigantic section, which Andrew did harvest off of that one. I want to say maybe 3 or 4 days ago, so it's probably loaded up again. Oh, wow. And I just keep seeing more that I missed. So what we've been doing with these green beans is we've been freezing them, but we are pretty low on freezer space. We don't have a deep freezer yet, like a chest freezer. So we've been making do with the freezer in our house. We have an extra like fridge and freezer in our garage, and then we have like a mini freezer, and all of them are full. So we have to figure out what to do with this. I really want to try pressure canning these. I've never pressure canned anything before. We don't even have a pressure canner yet, but this might be the thing that gets us to get a pressure canner. I really want to try one of those electric ones because the big ones kind of scare me. I want to be able to do that with someone who knows what they're doing and knows how to do it. I have one friend that knows how to pressure can, but yeah. So this is a lot. This is only one section. It's an exciting thing and also kind of daunting thing. There's so much food out here. This is crazy. We might end up giving a lot of this away too, which is one of my favorite things about gardening is giving it away.
The next thing I'm harvesting is peppers in this bed. So most of these are Italian peppers, and these are beds that I really worked on cleaning up the last week. And so I found a lot of pepper plants that I actually didn't know had survived, which is kind of a great surprise. There was a ton of grass in all of these beds. These are sweet bonnet peppers. They are the non-spicy version of a Scotch bonnet. They were a little bit spicy on the seeds still, but they weren't bad. I'm a complete lightweight when it comes to spicy foods. Andrew loves it. But I was able to eat these and they're fine. This was kind of a novelty pepper for us. We just wanted to try it. We probably won't grow them again, but I think they're really cute and it was fun to try them for this year. Next up is the okra. So we had 4 okra plants at the beginning of the season. One of them fell over, and so I took it out when I was cleaning up this bed. And you can see that most of the pods on here are way too big to eat. So okra, you really have to eat it when it's young and small. And most of these are really woody. They get kind of hard and kind of like tree branch like when they've been on the plant too long. And what happens is those pods then dry out, and then the kind of like mucus that's inside okra dries out also, and then you can harvest the seeds once they're completely dry. And then this is kind of one of the last few sections of our cherry tomatoes. So this was the last of the tomato harvest for this cattle panel. We grew Amish paste tomatoes, super sweet 100 cherry tomatoes, and Roma tomatoes on this panel this year. And this was a new experiment, growing them this way, just kind of in the back of our garden. I really liked this method. I will definitely do it again. It was great to be able to just have so many more tomatoes in our garden and not have them take up bed space. But this was, like I said, this is the last harvest off of these cherry tomatoes. The Amish paste tomatoes, we already took the plants out, and the Romas on the other side of these are completely done. And so what we're going to do now is take these plants out, and then we'll be able to kind of tarp this whole area because there's a lot of grass. We actually did wood chip it at the beginning of the year, and the grass just completely took over. So we are going to tarp this whole area and kind of put it to bed for the fall. Next up is pumpkins. So this was a really fun project that we did this year. Just completely out of the blue, I decided that I wanted to do kind of a pumpkin patch in the back area of our garden where we just didn't have anything growing. And so back here we have sugar pie pumpkins, which are the small variety you see right here that people use to make pumpkin pie. We decorate with them first, and then once, the fall season is over, I will roast them and take all of the flesh out and then freeze the pulp for pumpkin pie. And then the other variety that we have in here is called a Howden pumpkin. It's a jack-o'-lantern variety, so it's a carving pumpkin. I'd never grown that one before, but I really wanted to try and grow carving pumpkins to see if I could. And we did. We successfully did it, which was really awesome. They got to be a pretty good size. We have some ones that are bigger that aren't quite ready yet, but these plants produced pretty quickly, and so it was really nice to be able to take all of these pumpkins inside and start decorating for fall. Look at that. I'm so proud of that thing. It's pretty. The other cool thing about this is I was able to grow pumpkins and give a couple away to a friend. And in the future, I want to grow enough pumpkins so that we can have pumpkin carving parties for all of our friends' kids, and they can come over and they can carve pumpkins and they can paint them and all of that kind of stuff. And so those are my kind of like future pumpkin goals, and this year was really a tester to see if I could do it. And we did really well. And so next year I'm going to see how many more I can grow, and then we might make a party out of it, which is really fun. This is this is 3 of our Roma tomato plants at the end of our cut flower experiment garden right in the middle. And these plants did really, really well. They were really bushy, really healthy. And I'm just kind of picking the last couple things off of here. They've been done for a while. We just hadn't taken the plants out at the time of this filming. Those plants are gone now, but at the time on this day, they were still there. So I was just doing one last check. Same thing with these golden nugget cherry tomatoes. These have been amazing for us. So these were actually the first tomatoes to produce for us. I think they started in, I want to say May, and it's supposed to be a determinate bush variety, but they just kept going and going and going and going, and it's been really, really good. We do like the Super Sweet 100 cherry tomatoes more, especially when it came to dehydrating those. They taste like candy when we dehydrated them. They're so good. But these were great too because we got them, I want to say about a month, maybe a month and a half before any of our other tomatoes started producing. And we're still getting them. So all of our other tomato plants are kind of petering out, and these 3 little plants are still going strong. This is one of the last harvests, I think, off of these, just because I say they're still producing a lot, but they've slowed down a little bit. But it's great that I've still been able to continue to get a handful of cherry tomatoes that we can put in meals later in the season, especially when all of our other tomatoes are kind of done. One thing I really wanted to do this year was to do a second succession sowing of tomatoes. And my plan was to have suckers, to cut the suckers off and root them in water and essentially make new plants and plant those out so that we could have tomatoes later into the fall. And it just got away from me. I never actually did it. with the limited time that I have, it was just one of the things that didn't make it up to the top of the priority list. I really have been focusing on cleaning out the garden and, not wasting as much of what's in there just because we had some food that just went bad out in the garden, which was always really sad. I always have a ton of plans every year for the garden, and not all of them happen. And so I just kind of put a pin in them, and try again for next year. So you can see here, I got so many that I had to upgrade the bowl that all of them were in, and there was a bad one, so I just tossed it back, and I'll clean up all of those later. Here's a quick look at what we have so far. I'm separating out the cherry tomatoes that I did pick out of this bowl here just because we weigh all of our produce. And so it's easier for me when everything is just in its own separate bowl when I can, so that the weighing is faster when we go inside. At this point, we have about 570 pounds of produce that we've grown so far this year. And that is not counting the big pumpkins because we don't plan to eat those. So, it's just the sugar pies as far as weight of things. But it's been a really, really great garden year. We've definitely preserved a lot of stuff. We've given a ton of it away. And some of it went straight into our compost too, as far as like the cucumbers and stuff like that. But that's okay. Every year our goal is to just get a little bit better. As far as produce, this year we really wanted to grow 400 pounds of food, and that was double our best garden so far. And this was, way more space than we'd ever had before. We built out new beds at the beginning of the year, and I have videos on those if you want to check that out, as building out this garden. But our goal is always to just do a little bit better each year, and so far we've really been able to do that. And so I'm really happy with this garden, especially with all of the major life changes that we had this year. And, me being pregnant and then having a baby in this year, I'm really, really proud of myself and this garden. Here I am just cutting the top off a ton of basil. So this is our biggest basil plant right now. And so I'm just topping it all off so that we can make a bunch of pesto from it. It was starting to flower, and with basil you always want to cut it before it really flowers and gets good and going, because the flavor starts to turn kind of licoricey, the flavor and the smell. And so here I was just kind of giving it a haircut, making sure I didn't chop off the dahlia. Oh, these are morning glories. So we didn't plant these in the garden. They volunteered themselves. I think they came in our soil, and I was trying to show them in a previous video, and they were all crumpled up, and I thought they were gone, but I think that's probably just a part of the name where the blooms are open only in the morning. This corner of the garden right now, this in between these two beds, is my favorite place in the garden. There's so much going on here and so much just kind of blocking the pathways on both sides. So we have tomatoes and tomatillos and peppers and bush beans, and then in the back we have this big majestic pole bean trellis. That's where we have the Blue Lake pole beans that are doing the best in this shadier part of the garden. And then we have, the flowers mixed in, and I just love it over here. I do need to do some cleanup because it is a little bit wild. Oh, there's also pumpkins over here, and there were some squash that I took out, or there were some Armenian cucumbers that I took out. But there's just so much going on in this area, and I absolutely love it. So here I'm just checking the bush beans and seeing if there's anything in there that we can get. And this isn't our biggest section of bush beans. This was just kind of an empty spot that I had, and I like to fill all of my empty spots with bush beans for this reason right here: protect the soil, and it just kind of gives you a little bit more food. And so the bush beans are not one of those things that I typically give them their own spot. I kind of plant out the rest of the bed first, and then once I run out of starts and once I run out of plants, I just kind of like put them in various little gaps. And that works out really well for me. When I planted this out, I decided to do one half of this trellis with half pole beans and the other half noodle beans. And I am actually really glad I did that just because I think the noodle beans are really pretty. But at this point in the season, we are just overrun with the bush beans. So we're really focusing on those and just kind of letting the noodle beans be. And they're all just kind of drying out. I am going to harvest seeds from some of them, but this is just way more than we need seeds from. We will come out here, even if we came out here every single day, we probably wouldn't be able to get all of the pole beans off of these plants, especially this one, because we can fill an entire bucket with just the inside here, but the outside of all these plants on the outside of the trellis is covered in flowers and it's covered in bees all the time. It's really lovely. And so there is probably like 3 or 4 times as many pole beans growing on the outside of this trellis. Here is where we had our Roma tomato, kind of like a Roma tomato row. This was another 16-foot cattle panel, and on this one it was just Romas. And I had about 9 plants here. And between these 9 plants and then the other 3 plants that we had at the end of one of our 4x8 beds, we got about 100 pounds of Roma tomatoes off of that, which is wild. So we were making sauce off of those, and we canned a lot of tomato sauce off of those, and they were just really great. Here's one of those Howden pumpkins. It's one of the bigger jack-o'-lantern ones, and I'm really excited about that. And then this is just the back side of that pole bean trellis. So you can see it's just covered, and there's a zucchini plant that we are going to take out, and we have a Senora Zinnia growing in the middle there, and I just love it.
Okay, so I got everything at this point except this back half of this bed. And it's starting to get really hot out here. You can see the sun is officially on this side of the garden, just lighting everything up. And there's a lot back here. So there's an entire backside of the really full string beans. There's a bunch of peppers. There's the majority of the tomatillo plants back here. And then there's a whole section of bush beans. And then I have to check our cherry tomatoes here at the end to see if there's anything left on those. So it's too hot for me to finish this right now. So I think I feel good about the progress so far. And I'm going to come back out here hopefully this evening, if not tomorrow morning, and finish the rest of this. But I feel really good about the amount of food that I've pulled out of this garden. So here's what we got so far this morning. I have 2 Howden pumpkins here, which are the kind of like carving pumpkin size. These are a little bit on the smaller side, I think, for Howden pumpkins, but I'm still really happy with this. And then I have 2 of the sugar pie pumpkins. There's another one out there that had a gigantic spider on it. Andrew's gonna get that for me. Here I have a bunch of peppers, a couple okra, and an eggplant. We got 2 really good size honey nut squash, and then a little itty bitty one. A ton of green beans. So this is the Blue Lake pole bean here and here. And this isn't even all of them. I think there's still double this amount on the other side of the big trellis. Then we got what I think is the rest of our cherry tomatoes. So we have these really pretty golden nugget cherry tomatoes, and then I got a couple just straggler Amish paste tomatoes and Roma tomatoes in here. Here are our super sweet 100 cherry tomatoes, and I think there's probably a couple more on the plants over there. We have jalapenos and some really small poblanos. And then here we have our bush beans and then a couple tomatillos. There's going to be a ton more bush beans and a ton more tomatillos. And then I chopped off the top of one of our big basil plants. So we're going to make a ton of pesto with that. I feel like this is a really good place to stop this video. So thank you so much for joining me today in my garden. I had a lot of fun just going through and harvesting this. This is just so peaceful for me to be able to come in here and pick food out of our backyard. So thanks for joining me. And I would love to know what's growing in your garden right now in the middle of September. Is your growing season over? Is it almost over? Or are you gearing up for a full fall garden like we are? So let me know in the comments below. I'd love to know what your garden's looking like these days and what's your favorite thing coming in. Right now, for me, it's these habanadas. We wait all year for these little habanadas. They are so good. But anyway, yeah, thanks for joining me today, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.